Welcome to Alexa Developer Office Hours. Great to have you here on the show today. I don't have any announcements this morning. It is September 19th today. Good morning, good afternoon for some folks, or good evening, depending on where you're calling in from. So I'm going to get right to the topic of our show today. I want to welcome Jarrid Beasley, who is from our Voice of the Developer program. Welcome, Jarrid. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Amanda.
Thanks for being on the show today. We got some of our usual happy. Oh my gosh, it's Talk Like a Pirate Day. That's right. I forgot to talk like a pirate. You know, my dad always calls me on Talk Like a Pirate Day, and we usually have a Talk Like a Pirate conversation. I think we'll stick to talking normally for this particular event, but
Well, let's
for
do
all
that.
of you who
Let's do that.
celebrate, it is indeed me talking like a pirate day here at Alexa Developer Office Hours. well,
They're
well,
really more like guidelines,
more
aren't
than
they?
really more like guidelines. It is a fun day if you celebrate. Well, welcome, Jarrid. Thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks. Thanks for
we're
having
here
me.
to talk about your work with the Voice of the Developer program. Do you want to go ahead and start? Hi from Boston, you ladies. Yeah, Boston. They got the whole harbor. You can throw tea into it. That's good if you're a pirate. Um, I'm sorry, I'm so distracted. Okay, this is gonna be a fun one. I can already tell.
Yeah. We're getting started good.
We're getting started good. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at Alexa. You are part of our Voice of the Developer program. What is the
Yes.
Voice of the Developer program?
Yeah, so the Voice of the Developer program is responsible for collecting or aggregating developer feedback through a number of channels, prioritizing that feedback through a number of mechanisms that we use to categorize that feedback along the different stages of the developer journey, and then route that feedback to teams that are responsible for helping us come up with solutions at a high level. That's what the program exists for. And it was born, or it was reignited actually on the heels of a heuristic analysis led by a friend of the stream, Jeff Blankenberg, in advance of the Getting Started campaign
Mhm.
that released this year. I guess he's more than a friend of the stream, right?
it was his dream. I
OG,
know.
OG
We still
streamer,
whisper
OG
around here. Yeah,
streamer. Yeah.
indeed, indeed. Yeah, talk a little bit about that, the Getting Started campaign and the genesis of the new Voice of the Developer program from there. How did we get from there to here?
Yeah, so there were a number of issues raised that were related to just kind of trying to reduce friction for new skill starts all the way through to publishing and certification. A lot of the tickets that were updated through that heuristic analysis ended up in our backlog and kind of dovetailed in working with the Getting Started team in order to resolve those issues in advance of the campaign. But the program itself has grown to work with a number of different feedback sources coming through. We're working with the DAG team as well on a number of issues. The Ask UX team has also mechanized the Walk the Store practice. So we get a number of issues working with that team through that Walk the Store. As well as a few other areas. We worked with Amanda on flagging issues through the Champion Slack and on the community Slack channels, as well as through the HMD tool on ADC. So when we're aggregating a great number of issues, we need to have a method for looking at how we're going to prioritize those issues in order to surface the ones that are going to take action on. Obviously, we're working with a number of different engineering teams, and we need to be able to have those negotiations in order to get into the roadmap and planning for the efforts that we'll take to try and resolve some of the issues. Some of the issues are a little bit smaller, a little bit more UI focused improvements, let's say. And some of them are bigger problems that we need to tackle, like areas around testing or certification. There might be some bigger tickets to try and move through there.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Walk the Store. Last week we talked about location-based experiences and walking through a physical store to like figure out where things were in the store. So I feel like
Yeah,
this is a
yeah.
nice segue into this conversation where we're talking about walk the store, but in more of a metaphorical sense. So what does it mean to you and to your team to walk the store?
Yeah, I think we had a deep dive on the analytics tab, and maybe we had Ed
Hmm.
Campodonico on here to talk
Hmm.
through some of our findings around that. But the practice itself is really just taking a deep look at a section of the site or a stage of the developer journey and trying to look for improvements or optimizations that can be made to make things more clear, areas where people may be getting stuck or having issues, or if there are bugs, certainly we want to address those right away, any kind of defects. But we're really just taking a deep dive look at a section of the site that's related to tasks that we're expecting developers to be able to complete and quickly and easily is one of the refrains that we use in our DxO framework.
And you collect all that feedback via a number of channels, right? What are some of the different channels that you use to collect the feedback besides our personal walk the stores?
Yeah, so we'll again we work with the DAG team. So there's the contact us form is how they collect feedback. A lot of the issues that they get through that form, they'll work directly with teams in order to resolve those quickly. But if there are trends that emerge, that's when they'll reach out and have a conversation with VOD just to make sure we're aware that they're seeing an issue that's repeatedly coming up. So a number of developers are being impacted, and will bucket the issues by the impact to a stage of the developer journey. So we can look for hotspots there as well.
Okay.
So if we have a lot of issues that are showing up around testing or certification or somewhere in the skill creation flow, maybe related to invocations, we'll see that we have a number of issues or anecdotes that are collecting there, and we'll know that we need to maybe look a little bit harder at that area.
I'm sure it's a real challenge to prioritize, and maybe it's even something you can't entirely speak to. But what makes it what makes it rank stack issues the most important to the least? Is it when there's something new that comes up? Is it something that you're like, I'm hearing a lot about this, so we're going to go ahead and prioritize this?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So the DXOs have a priority that our categorization framework has a priority sort of baked into it. We look across a number of qualitative and quantitative data sources in order to be able to score how our the satisfaction with each stage of the journey, essentially. So when we're categorizing issues for VOD, they'll fall into a problematic DxO or a DxO where we just know that there's an opportunity for improvement. Um, that's one area or one way that we prioritize. On top of that, we still look at reach and impact. Reach sometimes takes us a little bit of time to get to, just in terms of being able to access the appropriate metrics, and make sure that we're contextualizing the issue appropriately based on the feedback that we're trying to address, in terms of which metrics we want to pull in order to determine if determine the reach or scope of impact for that issue, and then also just the severity of the issue. If it's keeping developers from being able to adequately QA or test or monetize, and if there's a lot of pain or anxiety or just a lack of satisfaction, negative sentiment around the issue. So looking at the volume there, but also the severity of that impact. So when developers are struggling, it's super important to us to make sure that we're prioritizing those issues that are blocking them from being able to deliver successful skills.
Great. I mean, it's a lot of work because I'm sure you get a mountain of feedback coming in from all these different channels.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of feedback. There's a lot that is directional and anecdotal, and some that's more related to issues that are UI issues or translation issues. So there's definitely a lot of feedback. I think we've gotten since the start of the program, over 200 issues that have been
Yeah.
collected that were actionable and needing to take action on them and prioritize them. So, and we've resolved close to 50. So it's upwards of around 25%. A lot of that was on the heels of the Getting Started campaign and working with that team, but a number of tickets have been resolved by other teams as well.
That's awesome. I want to talk about that. I will address the comment in the chat, which is anything that can be shared about possible changes coming. I'd wait to ask until after tomorrow. Yeah, it's just easier for all of us if you wait to ask after tomorrow. But I'm glad you mentioned it. Thank you for asking. Brian
there
Tarbox
are
always
there
says.
are there are and just in the interests of trying to close the loop and show
Mhm.
that we are listening and we're working together behind the scenes and taking action on all of this feedback that we're collecting.
Mhm.
There are a number of really exciting things that are coming through the end of the year, and obviously starting with tomorrow, but even beyond that in other spaces that I'm pretty excited to be able to talk about,
Yeah.
but we can't talk about it quite yet.
I've talked to you about this yesterday, but I often get the feedback that the feedback we receive, people don't always tell like how much that feedback has impacted our roadmap and where it goes after they do. So I think this would be a great opportunity to talk a little bit about what some of the successes of Voice of the Developer have been this year, what feedback has actually made it onto our roadmap, what we've incorporated, and what changes the feedback from developers have given us. So what have we done this year in terms of accomplishments with Voice of the Developer?
Yeah. So, great question, Amanda. Thank you. Obviously, in preparation for the Getting Started campaign, there were a number of a number of improvements and enhancements there, but one of the larger impacts that the VOD has had is just in being able to help surface the pain points and challenges around beta testing. And when that deprecation was being debated and then announced and then retracted, Voice of the Developer was in the room for a lot of those conversations and got to bring weight to that decision and those discussions. And then in terms of just impacting the roadmap, looking at our feedback, feeding into use cases and edge cases that hadn't been considered around testing, and how we need to make sure we're considering those things as we look to continue to support that capability moving forward. So we had launched recently some updates that allow developers to be able to enable smart home skills for testing, as well as skills with media or video skills. That capability had previously been had defects, let's say, in the test tab. So people were using our Betamax beta testing service as sort of a workaround for that, but we've corrected the issue and we've enabled that capability, I should say, in the test tab now. So that Betamax workaround is no longer necessary. We've also added, our testing team has added the ability to for developers to add explicit entitlement to skills. So you can add a user to test your skill, help you test your skill without having them have access to every single skill under the developer library. So that's also a really big thing that came out of some of the work that we've done with the test tools team.
Awesome. Yeah, there was a lot of for a while the beta, and when we say Betamax, we mean the ability of our developers to launch beta tests for their own skills, which there was a lot of conversation about how that's used. Because I think if you look at just the data about how people use it, it tells a different story than if you collect the stories of developers that are talking about how they use beta testing. So we really wanted to collect those stories and see how developers are using beta testing in their own skills, because we want to know if we're making the tool the right thing for developers. And as a matter of fact, you have a survey out right now about that?
I do indeed.
Oh,
Yeah. Is
okay.
there a place that we can share a link
I can
even?
paste it right into the chat if you've got it. If you've got it in the private chat, I could forward it to the main chat.
All right. Let me
In
shoot that
case
over
anybody out there wants
to
to take a survey about our beta testing systems. What we're trying to do right now is improve
I think that's it.
those. So yeah, this is an anonymous survey link, by the way, so anybody can answer this survey if you want, and if you haven't yet, please do see if that works for you. Check it out. Um, we would like to get that feedback for Voice of the Developer and to see how people are using those particular features. Um, what else is on there? I think you talked a little bit about getting started.
Yeah, we're also working on another initiative to streamline account registration.
Oh,
So
okay,
there are some exciting updates coming through that as well.
nice. Let's look at the chat real quick.
Sure.
Devices Servers event tomorrow, 11 EST. Yep, that is not a public event, but there will be videos posted up after and blogs as well posted up after. So that's when we'll get the information about that event. That's really all I know for today. Wolf on YouTube is asking, I submitted multiple feedback via user voice space after hearing from Contact Us. Is that a mechanism your team also takes a look at? Let's talk about user voice a little bit. I had questions about user voice too.
Yeah, let's do it. Oh, that's for me to start talking.
That's
Okay,
for
yeah.
you to answer. Yeah, yeah.
Kidding.
Question for you.
We
User
are
voice. Yeah.
actually starting to look at user voice. So I mentioned that we started the program, or the program was reignited, and that was probably early Q1. So we have started looking at user voice more frequently, and there are some updates there that are that we are working on, from suggestions from user voice. But I think there's more that we could do there, certainly.
The follow up is, what is needed to see a feedback or request taken into consideration? That's a pretty complicated question.
Could you repeat that question for me?
Yeah, it says, what is needed to see a feedback or request taken into consideration? Like, what do you look at when you see a request on user voice? How do you prioritize those? Like, what makes you take that feedback or not?
Yes,
Hard.
yeah, that is a tough one. So we've
Mm-hmm.
literally started coming through that, and the issues or initiatives that we've taken from there also mapped to some other surveys. So there was some connection with some other feedback sources and data that had been collected around some needs for streamlining different stages of the developer journey. So I think there's a cross section. That's one of the strengths, I think, of the program that we're working on here, is that we look at feedback across a number of different channels, and that's one of the ways that we also can prioritize, is just by looking at the hotspots of where there's a lot of active conversation. I think in looking through user voice, there could be a stronger effort to kind of close the loop and talk about why maybe some things are not moving forward. That's not information that I have necessarily ticket by ticket available today, but certainly I think we could do a better job of closing that loop for sure, and looking at flagging issues that actually have been addressed and released. And I'm going to fail to recall one, but I did working with members of the DAG team, find an issue that was on user voice, that a fix for it had been launched in April of 22.
Oh, right.
I think that in the hiatus, or there was an interruption in some activities where there weren't always the feedback loop wasn't always as strong as it could be. So I think that's something that we can look to improve too. But when we're looking at issues in the user voice, it is still looking through the lens of our prioritization with DXOs and DSAT scores, as well as to the votes for how many developers are given a thumbs up to a particular feature.
Yeah, I was about to ask. You also work with the developer sentiment survey, right? I know we did one last winter. And
Yes.
if there's feedback that crosses over between user voice and the sentiment survey, then I imagine it's like this is coming from multiple sources.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the areas that we're also looking at for um, at updating the um, streamlining account registration
Mhm.
is the area where I think there were some really key findings from that research of the sentiment survey that overlapped with a number of developer feedback sources, user voice, as well as HMD and other DAG contacts. So there was a pretty strong signal that there were some things there that needed to be addressed.
I think one of the things in there, I remember, I think even Jeff B talking about this, is like when you first sign up for your account, it asks you for your business name, but it doesn't indicate just how important of a choice that is because that you're
Yeah,
locked in to
that's
that
it.
choice. And
There
when
you
I
go.
and when I signed up, I just wrote Amazon because that's where I work, but obviously that's not my business name for my studio. But I mean, I didn't understand the question. So I had to email them and say, oh, you're gonna have to put something, I have to put
Yeah,
something else there. I don't, this is not, this is me as a developer doing this. This isn't me as Amazon doing this. But
yeah,
there's a little, needs a little more indication that that is your final choice, or else you've got to contact, you've got to submit a contact us and say,
absolutely.
that's a different business name from
So
what.
there's a number of and just to unpack that even momentarily, there's obviously a number of solutions or optimizations that you can make to address a challenge like that. Like
Mm-hmm,
one,
mm-hmm.
just like straight out of the gate, like letting people know that that is the importance or the weight of that decision. We talk about one-way doors and two-way doors. Well, that's like a two-way door, but it's not. It's a very heavy door, right? You got to push
Right.
that
You
one, and
can get them to change it. I had
you
to,
got to phone a friend.
but yeah, but just as a coming off the street, like just seeing it for the first time, it you don't know that that's your final answer unless you
Yeah, you're
email them and say, "Could please change this to something else?" It just seems like such a casual thing because all right, whatever job I'm working at the time, but no, that's your business name that
yeah,
is going to be you in the store. So you got to pick something that is actually your real business, your home business, your name, whatever it happens to be. It's just
absolutely.
one
So
example of something that I think it's great that your team is looking at all that stuff. Actually speaking of that, how big is this team? How many people are involved in Voice of the Developer? It's not just you, it's not just me. It's a lot of folks, right?
yeah, it is, and it spans a number of teams too. So the voice of the developer, I work with a number of other members of the Ask UX team, product and tech as well. um, Probably about three or four other people on a pretty regular basis, and then intermittently we can work with up to 10 different teams that we're routing issues to. So, and that includes TPMs, PMs, developers when we need to get on the line with developers for the tools and try and make sure that we're designing um, uh, visually and from a technical design standpoint the right solution for trying to address some of these issues. So it is a cross team collaboration.
Yeah, it's not just any one person because everybody's involved and like people own different parts of the console or different parts of the experience. So naturally, they would be contacted if there's something that we need to update or change, or if we have feedback about something.
Yep, absolutely. And then I work with a number of people across the DAG team as well. So probably about five or six people there that I meet with pretty regularly.
Shout out to our extremely helpful DAG team who was behind the scenes today for any technical questions you might have. Um, yeah, and I see a comment on Twitch from Voicerama. I submitted two ideas on user voice that are still in awaiting moderation. I think DAG team is on that. They'll check it out for you. Um, we're not. Yeah, it's not just one person checking the user voice. So if there's something in there that you want us to take a look at, yeah, they'll check it. They'll take a look. Thanks, folks. Speaking of that, different routes to give you feedback. That isn't just, it's not just user voice, it's not just sentiment survey. What are the other channels you use to collect information for Voice of the Developer?
Yes. So we'll look at user voice. We look at the DAG contacts, or we work with the DAG team. We did mention the walk the store mechanism, so we'll collect a number of issues there through heuristic analysis, and then also look at the HMD tool on ADC. We collect feedback through HMD as well, and then there's a COPS team that will elevate some issues largely around distribution and certification. We'll work with them. We'll also spend some time looking through the Slack channels. So for Alexa Champions channel, as well as the community channel on Slack, and try and, as you know, and meet with you periodically, and we'll try and make sure that we have a good beat on active conversations that we're looking to take action on, or at least monitor and do a deep dive to try and figure out there's a long tails issue that we're going to need to address there.
Yeah, don't forget, do join us on the Slack. I stuck the link. I always stick the link on at least once because it is a great way to get in touch directly with all of us. And it's not a huge community, so your chance of voice being heard is pretty good. We've got about 3,500 people on the Slack, so it's a good little big. It's a lot of people, but it's still, you're going to be there. You're going to have your voice heard if you want to chat on the Slack. And if you have questions about Alexa development, we're always watching. So somebody will have an answer for you if we're not live here on office hours and you're asking those questions live. So do, stop by. I was about to ask another question and then I lost it for a second. Oh, you know what? I'll just ask this. What's another way to get a hold of you if they want to give you feedback about it?
You can, I'm on both of those Slack channels, so you can reach out to me there. Jarrid Beasley or Bees Jar, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Or you can email me, beesjar@Amazon.
Bees as in BEAS and then JAR.
Yep.
If you really want to send, I will be, since you said it, I will be brave enough to put it in the chat here for those people who want to send you an email for Voice of the Developer. That'll get your feedback directly in front of people who are trying to route it to the right people and make sure that, don't flood us too bad, but there's also contact us for DAG, right? So there's lots of different ways to send us information.
It's probably best to tag me into a conversation in Slack. If it's an individual issue, DAG is probably still your best channel for getting immediate action. But if it's an issue that's obviously impacting a number of developers and something where it's not a single ticket resolution, but maybe we're looking at a deeper the need for a deeper, more permanent solution, then tag me into the Slack channel and I can see the history of the conversation and start to get a better idea for what that issue is. And then if I need to reach out to people and follow up with individual developers to try and get more of an idea of what's happening there, I can do it there as well.
Oh, and somebody, a UX Ed on Twitch says, oh, hi, Ed, UX Ed, how's my driving? HMD. That's what it stands for. We use so many abbreviations here at Amazon that sometimes we forget that HMD stands for How's My Driving. It's that feedback tab. Thank you for joining us today. Yes. UX Ed, thank you for joining us today. Yeah, it's the How's My Driving is the feedback tab at the bottom of the console. We do take that seriously. All of this stuff gets sent to people. I think the biggest challenge is sometimes it feels like you're just sort of saying something and you don't know if you're going to get a response to it. So we want to be sure that we're kind of posting and saying, hey, this is the stuff that you've changed and the feedback that we've incorporated. So beta testing is a great example. I think I collected a lot of feedback from developers about that, and you collected a lot of feedback from developers about that. And we're still collecting that because we really want to know our data alone doesn't necessarily show the whole story. So we need to hear your stories. And that reminds me of the thing that I was going to ask about, which is, I think you can talk a little bit about skill builder stories, right? When I first heard that phrase skill builder stories, I thought it was another thing that was getting posted on our YouTube channel, but this is actually your initiative, right?
I'm working with the Skill Builders Stories team. The
Right.
initiative itself is led by another UXer on our team,
Mm-hmm.
Kiara.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Shout out,
we're
Kiara.
shout out to Kiara Cowroy, and we're we had one session and looking at have another session through the end of the year, and that initiative itself is really a more informal discussion. Panel discussion was the last one. We might do some one-on-ones also, but really just looking to have a more casual conversation, and talk through different parts of the skill building process with our developer audiences. So um, meant more to uh, meant more to just understand the nature of the approach more so than to collect issues, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the last session was maybe an hour long conversation, and we're looking forward to just scheduling as many of those as we can through the next year.
And this is a bit of a casual process, not as formal as like an advisory council, but it's really just hearing the skill builder journey from the perspective of our developers and seeing, where the friction is for them, what they're doing that maybe we didn't anticipate, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, so it's we're looking for those sorts of let's say informal learning. So it's not like we're coming with a bunch of targeted questions to drill down super deep into the workflow or the process, but um, uh, just to understand the approach and the mindset and kind of help round out the human behind all of the actions that are being taken through the tools too. So it is, and there's there's nuance to certain levels of conversation that I think you can capture a little bit easier in a more relaxed setting, in order just to sort of continue the conversation, get to know you style.
I don't think we want to talk about like proprietary information from developers, but was there anything that surprised you about about this process or any of the feedback that you've gotten recently?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I think one of the things that surprises me is just some of the nuance around how tools are used versus how it's expected for them to be used.
Right.
And as much as we spend time, excuse me, um, and our due diligence up front, doing foundational research and having those kinds of conversations through our research team and our design team, as well as product, and even through build, showing alpha and beta test builds or A/B testing. You can still end up on the other end of the tooling, and people have just found a new way to use the thing, or maybe there were some edge use cases that just didn't get uncovered up front, and then you find out how people are using them once they're live. And it's just even for a company that's as customer focused as Amazon is, and again, I work with a great team full of UXers who spend a lot of time in due diligence in defining that product up front. It's still it's still nothing just beats releasing it in the wild and having people use it. So I think that part is always interesting to me, the gap that can exist there, and that's also just one of the areas where I think the VOD can help plug in and just kind of help color in the corners and illuminate, and help our product teams and design teams just stay aware of current uses and edge cases and places where we can always improve.
Yeah, I think when you're a software developer and you're designing something, and I'm sure this goes for all of our developers out in the audience as well, it surprises you what happens when the user encounters your product sometimes and the changes that they make or what they don't understand that seemed obvious to you or what how people use it in a way that was not anticipated. I think it happens to anybody who designs software, right? So I think it's the same on our end. We're designing the tools that help people design software. There's going to be those weird little gaps that were just unanticipated. Um, so people always have this question for me. I'm gonna throw it to you. It might be, one of our last conversation topics for the day, but people want to know, how can they influence our roadmap? And how can they do that? What's a good way? What are the ways?
Well, I'll say in a lot of ways, you're always influencing our roadmap. I mentioned foundational research, and we do usability testing through design. Obviously, right now, the best way to influence our roadmap is to hit that survey link for the beta testing and survey. But the feedback that we collect does impact our roadmap. The beta uh, beta testing initiatives, as well as the onboarding and revamping the um, onboarding tools, all born from developer feedback through a number of different channels. So the best way is just to keep having conversations with us in those spaces, and we'll get better about closing the loop and responding and showing some of the releases that we have planned through the end of the year, and making sure that we're tying that back to the inception in developer feedback.
Great. Yeah, I think everything that we've talked about today is all about just trying to listen to you, trying to hear from you. A lot of times we have a guest on the show and it's all about us telling you, right? Like, this is the new thing that's happening. But we're in a phase right now where we also want to be sure that we're listening. That's always how everything works around here. And there's lots of surveys and everything that comes out. So if you haven't checked out that beta testing survey, that's really valuable to us to like figure out what you're doing with the developer console, with the beta testing, what we want for certification, everything that we've had on the teams on here when we have feedback. Don't forget to share that with us. It's super important to influence us.
I want to dovetail on that really quickly too. One of the other things that this doesn't surprise me related to that question, but one of the things that delights me, let's say, is when we do get a piece of feedback that's just somehow just contextualizes the challenge and the problem that people are facing and really makes it concrete. Sometimes that anecdotal feedback, while we have weight through reach and impact metrics, and we might have a lot of cross-channel communications around a particular issue that obviously gives weight to the issue. But sometimes just the phrasing of a developer saying, "Hey, I have this problem, and it's causing me grief or pain, or the friction is just too much, and somebody needs to help me address this." People have offered bribes, I've been told.
Bribes.
Less about that. But when they contextualize a problem, when the problem is just distilled into an anecdote or an honest description of the challenge or the pain, it carries a lot of weight. It just ends up helping to really just in the prioritization discussions that we then have with teams that are responsible for the solutions. It just helps everybody get a shared understanding of the problem faster. And some people just have a way with words that just kind of helps that happen. And I would say just give honest, authentic feedback as often as you see fit, as often as you can, and we are listening, and it's very helpful for helping us prioritize and make sure that we're addressing the right problems.
And if you have positive feedback, especially in the "How's my driving" on the console, the HMD, if you have positive feedback, we read that too. That's delightful.
We do get positive feedback there. We do get a lot of positive feedback, and it's fun too to see through some initiatives where we get a lift in our "How's my driving" score, where we know that we're getting a lot of that we're moving in the right direction. So definitely, if you raise your hand, you have an issue, and we address the issue, yeah, definitely give us some positive feedback for sure. It's super helpful.
Yeah, this is something that I was talking about yesterday too. But if you have a problem, you don't necessarily have to provide what you think the solution is. That's kind of our job to figure out how to fix it. You can just tell us we have a
Yes.
problem and it's this. You don't have to necessarily say, I think you should fix it by doing Y, because a lot of times, if multiple people are having the same problem, they might have different ideas as to how to what the solution should be, right?
Yeah, also a really good point. I think it's also one of the things that might make it difficult to always see the through line from feedback to action,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
the solution may not be always the one that you'd necessarily envisioned, but the problem is still being solved, but maybe in a slightly different way. But yeah, agree with that sentiment as well. As much detail about the problem as you can give us is great, without being super prescriptive about the solution. But also sometimes that description of the solution can also just uncover the nature of the problem at
Sure,
times.
sure.
So I would also say just give us what you got. But
Right.
yeah, the detailed description of the problem is step one. I think that's probably fundamental to us being able to action that feedback.
Awesome. Yeah, you can send it directly to Slack, directly to Jared, or directly to any of our surveys that come out, including the one that just came out. So if you've got feedback, please send. I think we're kind of out of discussion topics today. But please share this impact with us too. If this is blocking you from succeeding, yes, absolutely. And even if this blocks you from launching in the near future, um, before we kind of wrap up today, I'd love to know, is there anything you're excited about that we can talk about, or we should wait and talk about it in a little bit later?
I am excited about. We should definitely wait and talk a little bit later. Maybe I'll just pop back around, but I'm definitely excited about what we're doing in the testing space, as well as what we're doing in streamlining account registration. I
Mm-hmm,
think we
mm-hmm.
have some an alpha release coming up for
Oh,
some
nice.
things that are also in those spaces, and there's a lot to be excited about through the end of the year for sure. So starting with everything that's happening this week, as well as beyond, I think there's a more than a handful of exciting releases planned.
And if you want to talk to us about the voice of the developer, about our roadmap, if you've got questions or suggestions, that's the link to the Slack. You're probably there already. If you're not, if you're seeing this on YouTube later and you've never seen our Slack before, jump in, give us a hello on the Slack. We will be there. And I'm usually here next week. I am not doing office hours next week. I'm taking a short break, but we'll be back the week after with some more Q&A of your Alexa skill development journey. So I'd like to thank you so much for being on the show today, and
Yeah,
for everybody who participated in chat today. It's been great, and we're going to continue to do this important work to make sure that our developers' voices are heard, and then that we're accountable for what they're telling us. So thanks, Jared, for being on the show.
absolutely. Happy to join.
All right, guys, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll chat with you on Slack or wherever we happen to find you.